Welcome to the Health in the Park Fair. This is our first speaker, Dr. Kim Rittmaster. She is a mom of 3 kids under 5, so she's also a chiropractor and a business owner, and so she surely knows something about stress. She helps her patients restore balance in the nervous system through neurological adjustments without the common snap, crackle, and pop. And she uses a whole body approach to improve health and wellness. So, with no further ado, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here today. So we are going to talk about stress. And before we get started, I just want to ask everyone in the room, how many of you have experienced stress in the past month or so? By a show of hands. Yes, everyone, right? So how about in the past week? Have you felt stressed in the past week? How about this morning? I have. And don't raise your hand for this one, but how many of you are feeling stress right this minute? A lot of us are. And a lot of us are not always aware of how, well, some of us are aware of how stress affects us on a physical level, and not everyone is. But what we're going to be talking about today is how stress really affects us on a cellular level and how that impacts our overall health. So before we get into that, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Kim Rittmaster. I am a chiropractor, owner of Hpa Institute right here in St. Louis Park. I really help my patients restore balance with the nervous system and really help my patients adapt to the stressors in their life so that they don't have to experience symptoms on an everyday basis. So I want to start off with some statistics. This one says that 43% of all adults suffer from adverse health effects from stress. And when I first saw this statistic, I was actually shocked. I thought it would be a lot higher. And it really just goes to show that there's a whole nother layer of stress that people don't really even consider stressful. It's a day, it's just part of their life, and they don't even consider it that stress is the root cause of some of their symptoms going on. 75 to 90% of all doctor visits are actually for stress-related ailments and complaints. I mean, that's a lot of people, 75 to 90% of people coming in for issues that are stress-related. But think of all of the symptoms and issues that people come in that don't go into their doctor, like a headache or other symptoms that maybe you don't necessarily tie to a stressor. So chronic diseases are the leading cause of death and disability in the United States. Just take a minute to think about that. Chronic diseases are the leading causes of death and disability, and it's been that way for the past few years. And what's really fueling this fire is an underlying common thread of stress. We all have experienced stress. When you first came into, the room and I asked you initially who's experienced stress, we're all very, very familiar with what stress feels like, and we usually associate that with an emotional stressor. This is a picture of like a tiger, and when we think about stress, usually we are thinking about an emotional stressor, right? We have deadlines to make, we have financial or family obligations, but what people don't always take into consideration is that there's a lot of other types of stressors as well. And so whether your stress is real, you have to slam on your brakes because there's a deer running in front of your car, or if, it's more of a perceived stress. So, like I said, those emotional stressors. You would think that your brain would have the ability to maybe differentiate between the type of stress that we're experiencing. But what happens is that your brain perceives stress, whether it's the tiger or whether it's, you're running late for work, and it starts this cascade effect, what's called the Hpa Axis. And really what happens during this effect is that your body produces stress hormones. And so if you just, and we're going to dive into this a little bit more today, but you can just see how if we're constantly being inundated with stressful experiences and stressful stimuli in our environment, our bodies are constantly being exposed to stressors, even though we're not running from a tiger all the time. Diving in a little bit deeper of those external stressors. So there's different types of stress. So there's chemical stress, there's physical stress, and then that emotional piece that we're all pretty familiar with. So the chemical piece is basically our environmental stress. So chemicals in our water, in the air, in our food, in medications that we're taking, this all builds in our system, and it adds to the overall toxic load of the stress in your body. And then, you know, not all stress is bad. Obviously, physical exercise is really good for you, but when we have physical stressors on our body, whether it's a severe illness, surgery or trauma, or even maybe a really intense workout, this can have a negative impact on our body and cause the body extra stress. And then again, emotional stressors. So there's a lot of external stress that adds to our body and how we're functioning. So I want to show you this quick diagram of the Hpa axis. This is where the brain is going to perceive a stressful situation. What happens is the brain is going to signal the hypothalamus to then signal the pituitary gland to then signal the adrenal glands to produce stress hormones. And the main hormone that is responsible for helping us get into a fight and flight state so we can fight is our stress hormone cortisol. So our brains and our bodies are very, very brilliant in the fact that it has this mechanism allowing us to prepare and, you know, run from that tiger or handle the threat that we're exposed to. But what happens is when we have all those other external environmental, you name it, stressors, the body and the brain is continually being told to produce stress hormones. So eventually, cortisol is going to increase inflammation inside the body, and the gut is actually going to start recognizing that there's extra inflammation in the body. And so the connection between the gut and then the brain is through what's known as the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve will tell the brain, hey, we're stressed out down here. There's too much inflammation. We have too much stress hormones running through our body, and so it perpetuates this vicious cycle. So now we're getting external stressors from our environment, and now the internal environment is also telling our brain that there's extra stress, and it's just continuing this and really creating a chronic state of what's known as fight or flight. On the internal side of things, I really want to emphasize the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body. It starts in the brain, and it literally wanders its way throughout the body, and it helps regulate different organs, and it promotes homeostasis within the body. It's king of what's called the autonomic nervous system, and that's part of our nervous system that helps us either get into a fight or flight state, so if we're going to have to, you know, run from a threat in our life, or and it also controls the rest and digest portion of our nervous system. The vagus nerve is going to communicate via the internal side of our body with the brain, extra stressors. It's responsible for all the functions that happen in our body that we don't have to think about. And we're aware of less than 10% that's actually happening in our body. So this nerve is very, very important to managing and just helping the brain understand what's going on inside the body. Whether your stress is perceived, whether it's real, whether it's internal stressors or external stressors, all of this is going to build up in your system, and eventually this is going to lead to what's known as sympathetic dominance. And this is sort of like driving your car with a parking brake on. You can drive your car for a while, but eventually if you have that parking brake on, you're going to start seeing warning lights, and your car is going to start breaking down, and you're going to have it tuned up a lot more. You're going to have to, I don't know, I'm not a car person, but essentially your car's going to wear down. And what this is going to lead to in your own body is a constant state of fight, flight, or freeze. So that's known as the sympathetic nervous system. Your brain's going to start to hardwire being stuck in that fight or flight state. The body wears down, and you start to experience symptoms, poor health, and different symptoms will pop up. In my practice, I see a lot of patients that come in with some common symptoms, and some of them I just wanted to share with you. So I see a lot of chronic illness, autoimmune disease, a lot of food sensitivities. One of the biggest things that my patients come in with is anxiety, mostly anxiety and stress. Depression usually goes along with that as well. A lot of hormone imbalances, sleep disturbances, skin rashes, irregularities, and then also irritability, so mood issues. So I see a lot of this, and really what the common thread is with all of these symptoms is an underlying constant stressful lifestyle. I put this picture up here because, you know, I would wish that I have a magic wand and I can really take away all the stress for my patients and everyone around me. It's obviously not realistic, but what I do help my patients with is helping their nervous system balance out so that they can handle those stressors that are thrown their way, and adapt better to the stressors. Because let's face it, everyone is going to experience stress on a daily basis. And it's a matter of how well is your body handling the stress and adapting to it so it's not throwing you into symptoms and feeling really sick all the time. So let's talk a little bit about this. These are some core essentials that I recommend for my patients to handle stress. Some of these are no surprise to you, but the one that I would want to really point out to you is gratitude. There's a lot of studies out there that show when you practice daily just a simple sentence or two of something that you're grateful for, it can really change your perspective on how you're seeing the world, how you interact with others, and your own irritability and mood, and your balancing out your nervous system so you can break that chronic cycle of being stuck in a fight or flight. So that one's really important. Movement is always important, and we know that. If you're ever looking for that magic pill of something that's going to help you with your symptoms or how you're feeling, X, Y, and Z, you name all of it, if you incorporate some movement into your lifestyle, that's going to really help decrease your stress overall. Hydration is always important. That's going to help flush out some of the toxins that are inside your body. And then diet, I could talk, have a whole different session on diet. Really where I start with my patients is having them include extra green vegetables, really getting some of those nutrients and vitamins in. So veggies and fruit, just increase a little bit more. And then sleep. Sleep's super important. And I always recommend at least 7 to 9 hours for my patients to get every night, because this is when your body's going to have the chance to get out of that fight or flight, and it will help your nervous system shift into the parasympathetic, which is where rest, digest, where your body's going to repair itself from the inside. So if you're not getting that chronic or that 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night, then your body's never having a chance to drive without that parking brake on. It's just adding more fuel to the fire and more stress onto your body. So you need to give your body a break so it can regenerate. Here are some additional ways that you can help your body with improving that vagal tone. So going back to that vagus nerve, how does the vagus nerve help us with our stress? Well, again, it's in charge of helping our body into help us shift into that rest and digest so that your body can regenerate and balance out. But doing things like yoga, singing and laughing, these are all going to stimulate the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve, we want it constantly stimulated so it helps balance the nervous system. Gargling is one that surprises people because that vagus nerve is responsible for the muscles that are in the back of your throat. And so when you actually gargle, you're stimulating that nerve and you're helping your body break that cycle of being in fight or flight. Exercise, again, massage, even cold temperatures. So this is great for us living in Minnesota, but it's also, drinking cold things, or, if you want to gargle some cold water, you can get like a double effect there. And some breathing exercises. That's going to really, really trigger your nervous system to downshift. And then chiropractic adjustments. Really, this is where I help my patients balance out their nervous systems. Again, I can't take away anybody's stressors, and I can't cure anybody, but what I can do is help people manage the stress that's on their plate a lot easier, and we do that by balancing the nervous system. What I do in my office is we do have a couple of scanning tools for your nervous system, and what that does is it helps me understand how well is your nervous system overall adapting to the stressors in your life, and I use that as a baseline just to see where you're at, and it helps me design treatment plans for patients. But really it's about helping your body adapt and handle the stressors in your life rather than trying to take them all away, because life is stressful, and so there's just a lot of things that you can do, and I hope that this was helpful, just giving you a couple of tips to incorporate into your daily life. So I appreciate you coming here today, and thank you for being here. So thank you very much. If anyone has questions, so do I do all of these things? What exactly?
Well, like the yoga, the singing, the gargling, the laughing, the exercise, massage cold, or the gratitude movement, hydration, diet, sleep? Sure,
I do all those things. I absolutely do, yes. And so gratitude is huge, and that's something that I definitely incorporate. Diet's a big piece in my family. Yeah, all of these things, and it really takes you know, the food, the brain, the physical piece, all of that needs to come together to really be balanced, right? So absolutely. Yeah. Any other questions?
I have a question, actually.
Sure.
So when you get that buildup of cortisol, quickly you can move to some relief for this.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question is basically what's the prognosis and how soon can you expect to see your body start changing once you start incorporating some of these techniques that we just discussed to help your body get out of fight or flight? And really, the answer is that it depends, because it depends on how much stress do you currently have in your life and how much stress is added to your plate on a daily basis. And that looks different for everybody. Again, even if you look at somebody who lives in Minnetonka versus St. Louis Park versus Wayzata, we all have different water systems. So that alone is going to impact the different level of stressors that we're taking in with our water. So that's why I like to use some of the nervous system scans in my office, because I want to know the full picture for my patients of where they're at. And so we scan and we can see how well the body's adapting so far, or at their current state, and then that helps me come up with some ideas. I would say that some stressors our nervous system will hold on to from when we're like little kids. So the prognosis is that it depends, but it can take a few months definitely to go through and help the body release some of those stored stressors and adapt better. Because the goal is we want the brain to not constantly be stuck in fight or flight, and we want the brain to realize that it can be in rest and digest. We want that balance so that you're not experiencing all of those symptoms all the time.
Now, I'm not sure if you have kids, but I'm wondering what do you do when your kids are stressed out?
Good question. I do. I have 3 kids, and it presents differently for each kid. Sometimes it's behavior. Sometimes it's, skin rashes. It can be different for any kid. So again, incorporating a lot of these things such as diet, getting them outside and exercising. I adjust my kids in the way that we parent too. So it is tricky, but it's a balancing act. I mean, it is tricky. Do you have kids too?
I do.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're stressed out a lot too.
Yeah.
A lot of school stuff,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do see a lot of kids who, it's just surprising, like so many kids these days they feel that impact of the stress, and they are dealing with so much anxiety. And so I've had a lot of parents come in initially, and then they start bringing their kids in because they realize the impact that it helps with them, and then they're parenting better, and yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I was on
Yeah, and that's great that you were able to notice a physical change from reducing your external stressors, because it's a long time to be on a flight when you're flying overseas. So absolutely, I mean, you probably were able to rest. You weren't interpreting all the conversations around you, and you were able to recover essentially if you were sleeping and in a parasympathetic state of your nervous system. So absolutely, good question. All right, anyone else?
I have one quick.
Yes.
So what does age have to do? You getting older?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question is, as people age, are all of these, ideas and suggestions to help balance your nervous system still applicable to every age group? And basically they are. I mean, everybody's producing new cells every single day, over 3 billion cells, whether you're 2 or 92, it doesn't matter. Now, obviously the aging process happens, but the goal is to make sure that the nervous system is balanced, because when that happens, everything else in your body can function the way that it's supposed to. So you want your body nice and balanced so that you are producing really healthy, you're turning over really healthy cells as you age. So a lot of people will come in their mid-30s or 40s, and they'll say, well, I've been healthy my whole life. All of a sudden I have X, Y, and Z problem. Usually they have some kids too, so that adds a whole nother layer of stress as well. But what's happening is that the body's finally catching up with the amount of stress that's built up over many years. And so it takes some time to unwind and balance out the nervous system, because although we're not feeling it from maybe our 20 to 40, but it's still happening. We're aware of less than 10% of what's happening in our body. So we think we're, you know, in control and we understand everything that's happening inside, but there's a lot going on that we're unaware of, and the impact that our life and the stress that we have can actually affect us on a physical level. So did that answer your question?
Good.
Perfect. Great. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming and listening today. Great questions. I appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Thanks.